this on? Is this high enough? I feel like I'm shouting. Oh, there it is. We want it on the inspired set. Okay. Okay, we've had a miracle, y'all. And that is, here at Unity, we're actually starting a little early. Okay, before we introduce Marianne Williamson, but she hardly needs introduction, but before I do that officially, I want to introduce our other two wonderful guests. We have Minister Cedric Blaine Singh. He is Minister of Music at the Bethel AME Church in Conway. He assists in the music ministry at the Friendship MBC in Conway, and he also serves as the chapel musician at the Ocean View Funeral Home. Wow! I met Cedric, I think, for the first time after the Charleston 9 shooting when we spoke over there at the AME Church here. He's played the piano since age 3, y'all. So he's been practicing. I'm getting up.
Reverberation?
Okay, how's that? I'm going to try not to pop too much into this.
Is that better?
Yes. He's a licensed minister with the General Assembly of God. He is a member of the South Carolina State Democratic Party, Executive Council, and also Executive Committee member of the Horry County Democratic Party. And he was an Horry County School special education teacher for 25 years. God bless you, Cedric. And his current activism, you may have seen on the news or in the newspaper, he is serving his Sandridge community as a spokesperson addressing the issues of gentrification, fighting to save yet another Gullah community on the Grand Strand. Yes. How is the mic doing? Is it?
Yes.
And our beloved Reverend Dr. Preston McKeever Floyd is here with us. Retired Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Philosophy and Religious Studies at Coastal Carolina University. He's co-founder of the Women's and Gender Studies program at CCU and affiliate faculty with the Women's and Gender Studies program at the University of South Carolina. He's also the founder and CEO of the McKeever Floyd Youth Sports Academy in Monrovia, Liberia, and a beloved speaker here. So Cedric and Dr. Preston are going to be blessing us with music tonight. And before I introduce Marianne Williamson, we want to hear their music. So while you're getting settled in at the piano, I'm also going to do a few thank yous. So y'all get settled in over there. I want to thank all of our wonderful volunteers who showed up to help pull this event together really quickly. We found out that Unity people can move really quickly. And that's a fabulous thing. So let's hear some music from our beautiful Cedric and Preston. And thank you, y'all, so much for being
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was and grace my face. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first through many dangers, toils, and snares, I have overcome. 'Twas grace that could be saved thus far, and grace will lead me when we
Sunday speaker on August the 4th, so mark your calendar for that. While we are feeling the amazing grace, let us take a deep breath and let ourselves sink into the heart of our being where we can feel that grace, that peace, that wonder, the enthusiasm for what's possible. In Unity, we teach that there is a great field of mighty possibilities. We don't even see them all yet. And it feels like right now, this moment that we're in the country that we live in and the world, many things seem impossible. There seem to be impasses, and it seems to be that we're all taking a lot of deep breaths right now. So once again, we take a deep holy breath into that place of grace. And we call forth grace to lead the hearts and the minds of all peoples on this planet, all of our world leaders, government leaders, city commissioners, county commissioners. We call on grace to lead us through this moment that can sometimes feel so confusing and so hard. We call forth grace. We call forth peace. We call forth understanding. Again, we pray that all world leaders, community leaders everywhere have as their highest priority the well-being of all life. Four-leggeds, two-leggeds, the winged ones, the rivers, the oceans, the air, all life on this planet. We call forth peace, peace, peace. And we say, so it is, and so we let it be. Namaste. And so the reason that we gather tonight is Marianne Williamson. Woo! And the reason we gather tonight is because we want to hear something that makes sense. We want to hear something that feels true and sounds true. We want to hear something that makes our hearts open and our minds expand into the great possibilities that exist for our species. And so much we open our hearts and minds that they don't close again. I first heard of Marianne Williamson in the early 80s, probably 81, something like that. I was up there visiting with Hilda Charlton in New York City, riding 4 hours from the city to the upstate of New York, and someone thrust a little cassette tape into my hand, and it was handwritten, Course in Miracles, Marianne Williamson. And being fresh out of the Pentecostal movement, I said, what does anybody have to teach me about miracles? So what became a phenomenon, the Course in Miracles, hitting at the same time that AIDS was hitting. And I know many people who found their way back into spirituality through the Course in Miracles, people who'd been hurt by churches, people who'd been told they weren't okay and weren't good enough to be a part of the church. And the Course in Miracles opened the doors wide to the LGBT community, to everyone, no matter what religion, what culture, what skin color, what nationality. And so this is how we know Marianne Williamson. And now, Spirit placed in her consciousness the audacious idea to be a presidential candidate. She is here to speak with us about a politics of love, another audacious idea. And we know what our part is, and that is to keep holding the vision for our human family until we get our hearts and our minds right. Yeah. Y'all, please welcome Marianne Williamson. Thank you.
Reverend Margaret, you are my kind of woman. There was so much that you said that I always wanted to take notes. Your phraseology was so perfect. And thank you. What an honor to be here with you, present with you, Senator. Thank you so much. Thank you. Everything about this evening, everything about the consciousness of this place, the spirituality, the political sensibility that you mentioned, I feel so home. So thank you very, very much. It's wonderful to be here. When you said we are here to celebrate enthusiasm for the possible, you know, this country is tired. This country is weary. This country is emotionally feeling so debilitated right now. And the kind of debilitation that the entire country feels is what many of us recognize as having brought us originally into rooms like this. That we ourselves were blind in some way. Even though that song emerged from the life and the experience of one man who'd been a slave trader, he was blind and now he saw. I think one of the reasons the song has meant so much to so many millions of people is because even in circumstances far less dramatic than that, there are places where in our own lives we feel that we were wretched and we were blind, and through the grace of God we came to see. And I feel that so many of us have seen in our lives the miracles that God works, has seen in our lives how things can change, have seen in our lives how things can transform. It's not just intellectual theory. That song emerged not because the man who wrote it had an intellectual theory. He wrote it because he had that moment of eureka. He was blind, and then he saw. And many of us, in various ways, were blind, and then we saw. And seeing made all the difference. Because what we saw was the realm of love in which all things are possible. And that did something to us. It purified our hearts, and it made us different people. And I'm not assuming that any of us are here tonight because we're enlightened masters. But the way I always feel is, I might not be an enlightened master yet, but I sure am better than I once was. And so sometimes you celebrate the path you've already taken. You're on, it's awe-inspiring enough, right? And I feel as a generation, particularly as a generation of spiritual seekers, we have come to a point, there's a line in the Course in Miracles where it says, when I am healed, I am not healed alone. That we are never healed only for ourselves. That at a certain point, if you feel that through the grace of God, you have received some tools through which your own life was transformed, you have a moral responsibility to pass it on. You have a moral responsibility, just as people in AA, the whole concept there is that one of the ways you stay sober is by being available to those who are only just getting sober. I have felt for a long time about the New Thought community, a frustration with what has been a tendency towards a resistance to any kind of political activism. I've never understood it. Because as Reverend Margaret said, early in my career, starting when I began, it was in 1983, the AIDS community exploded. The AIDS epidemic exploded. So my teaching of Course in Miracles and holding groups on the Course in Miracles was never separated from a very intimate interface with human suffering. And to me, I've never felt that as a seeker, there's no spiritual or religious path anywhere that gives any of us a pass on addressing the suffering of other sentient beings. I'm Jewish. One of the main tenets of Judaism is tikkun olam, to repair the world. One of the most profound Talmudic sayings is, you are not obligated to complete the task, but neither are you permitted to abandon it. That once we realize who we are, there's a connection between realizing who we are and recognizing why we're here. If you realize you are love, then by definition, that means in every moment, our job is to express God's love. That God's love enters into us, so it says in the Course in Miracles, and then it extends outward to us, and from us, outward to us, from us into the lives of other people in whatever way, through our thoughts and our behavior. Now, one of the tenets of metaphysical understanding, also one of the tenets of Einstein's understanding, one of the tenets of Buddha's understanding, is that the world of the three dimensions is a bit of an illusion, as Einstein would say, albeit a persistent one. But it's the world that we live in as human beings. Now, those of us who were students of metaphysics and New Thought understand that there is a more real world on the other side of this, that this world is a bit of a veil of illusion. And on the other side of this, there is a world that is more true and more beautiful. And that is a world that we can choose to live in any given moment if we are willing to inhabit the space of love, to choose to perceive the goodness in others rather than to choose to blame them or to judge them. If we choose to be giving rather than selfish, if we choose to dwell in possibility rather than focused on limitations. But there is more to it than that. And that is that the Course in Miracles anyway, and all of these kinds of things, say that the job is not therefore to ignore the illusion, that God sends us into the illusion to transform it. So this idea of ignoring the illusion is not transcendent. It's just a convenient state of denial. And you're using this kind of pseudo-spiritual cover for your failure to show up for other suffering people. There's nothing spiritual about that. You call it a lot of things, but don't call it spiritual. And there's nothing holy about complacency, and there's nothing negative about yelling fire if in fact the house is burning down. So as Reverend Margaret said, and you put it so beautifully, I felt the call within myself. In the Course in Miracles, it talks about the plan of the teachers of God. And the idea here is just as every cell in the body, you're assigned to the pancreas, you're assigned to the lungs, you're assigned to the heart, you're assigned to the blood. Just as every cell in the body is assigned to a place where it is to collaborate with other cells in order to serve the healthy functioning of the organ and the organism of which they're part. That's how nature operates. That's how nature operates in the body, and the patterns of nature are mimicked on every level. Now, every once in a while, a cell in the body goes insane. Every once in a while, a cell in the body disconnects from its natural intelligence. And instead of collaborating with other cells to serve the healthy functioning of the lungs or the stomach or whatever it is, instead the cell goes off to do its own thing. That's a malignancy. That's what cancer is. That's a malignancy in the body, and it's also a malignancy in consciousness. And that is what has happened to the human race. A malignancy of consciousness. That's what the ego mind is. That's what the belief that we are separate from each other is. It is a spiritual malignancy. Where we have forgotten the state of humanity. We have forgotten that we are here to collaborate with each other in order to create and to support the healthy functioning of that which is bigger than ourselves. And that is why when Reverend Margaret said we're here to hear something sane. Because a world in which every person thinks it's only about me and I'm only here about myself, that's insanity. That's why Mahatma Gandhi said the problem with the world is that humanity is not in its right mind. And even in our community, over the last few years, there's been this ridiculous, really preposterous notion that somehow the fact that I can manifest my dreams is the spiritual mountaintop. The fact that you can manifest your dreams is not the spiritual mountaintop. I'll tell you who manifests his dreams, Adolf Hitler. The fact that you can have a vision and make it manifest says nothing about whether or not that vision is good or not. Nothing to say about whether that vision is loving. I'll tell you there's a manifestor named Donald Trump he's certainly a manifestor. The idea that someone can manifest is not the spiritual mountaintop.
That's right.
It's whether you manifest love or whether your mental energy and your behavioral efforts are used in the service of that which is not love. And one of the metaphysical realizations is that mental energy is not neutral. So it's like when Bob Dylan wrote a song years ago, you're gonna have to serve somebody. It might be the devil, it might be the Lord, but you're gonna have to serve somebody. You know, we have dwelled as a Western consciousness, and to some extent even among spiritual seekers, under this myth of neutrality. Elie Wiesel talked about how neutrality always serves the oppressor. Neutrality is a myth. Your energy is going somewhere. You know, when I was young, when many of us were young, they used to say, if you're not a part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And I think a lot of us, particularly societally, have liked to think, well, I'm not out to hurt anybody. I'm not out to hurt anybody. I remember years and years ago, a girlfriend of mine, there was drama with a man, and I remember she said, I never meant to hurt you. I said, you never meant to help me. You know, we're very easy today with the words of support. I really support you. I really support you. I feel on this campaign, I think sometimes with all my friends who say, I really support you, I can't help but think, have you sent $1? Yeah. Exactly. You're paid by you support me. We use these words where I didn't mean to hurt you. You know, it's not enough to say I didn't mean to hurt you. It's not enough to say I didn't mean to hurt anyone, because all energy either breaks through the material density of fear in order to help forge the way to a greater love, or it is actually used by the energy of the status quo to move in the direction of greater fear. That's the word inertia. The word inertia, I used to think the word inertia meant the tendency of the object to remain still. That's not actually the meaning of the word inertia. The meaning of the word inertia means the tendency of the object to move in whatever direction it's moving.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, when my career began, and so many of the people in my lectures had AIDS, how could we come together every Saturday morning, every Tuesday at night, and ignore the fact that there were people there who were dealing with this scourge? And so when we started these organizations to help people with AIDS, it was not only for the people who had AIDS, but it was also for the other people in the audience, because at a certain point, if your spiritual seeking does not include the extension of love into the life of another person, it's just narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
It's still all about me. Anything that's all about me is the problem. The evolutionary trend that will save the human race is for us to move from me to we. And this is not just nice. This is so much past need to be nice. It's the only survivable option for the human race.
Amen. Woo!
Martin Luther King said, we will learn to live together as brothers, or we will perish together as fools. So I have always felt in the New Thought community, in the higher consciousness community, because this is my tribe. This is where I've been for the last 35 years of my life. I have never understood, and I've often been frustrated by this very apolitical bent, because I've always felt that those of us who have some knowledge of higher consciousness, we're the last people who should be sitting out the great economic and social and political questions of our day. We should be the biggest grown-ups in the room. We're the last people who should be standing on the sidelines. You know, what calls itself a sophisticated mindset today, this densely material filter, which only sees the realm of effect and has no sense of the realm of cause, it thinks it's so sophisticated, it's very unsophisticated. A recognition of the various planes of human existence, of emotion, of psychology, of spiritual principle. Those of us who recognize that life is very multidimensional, that there are realms we see and realms that we don't see, that there are simply laws of consciousness, laws of cause and effect, that how people feel will move them to do things, that how people think will lead them to move things. That does not mean we are shallow thinkers. That means we are the deepest thinkers, and that is the thinking most needed to transform this country. From a higher consciousness perspective, is looking at the realm of the so-called illusion and saying that's all there is. No. But the spiritual call within all the great religious systems of the world, just like when you go to the doctor, if you have a broken elbow, the doctor doesn't say, "Ooh, that's so negative, I don't want to look at it." If you have stage 1 cancer, the doctor doesn't say, well, let's not focus on it because that'll make it expand. If you have stage 1 cancer, what can make it expand is if you don't focus on it to a certain extent. So the idea that the spiritual seeker somehow stays separate from what is going on in the world, the seeker is the seeker after the transformation of our own lives. Transformation from the wretch that we once were in whatever area to someone who can see. And then it doesn't stop there, which is, and I say it, I've seen it so much on this campaign. I've had these moments on this campaign over and over again. People who would say to me, your books have meant so much to me. Your books have meant so much to me and helped me get sober. I became a Course in Miracles student. So much has happened. And I've always said, every time someone says that to me, now let's take what God has done for us and let's do that for this country and for this world. Of church and state in this country, and that's one of the most enlightened elements of our Constitution. But let's talk for a moment about what it is and what it isn't. When we were little children, we were taught in ways that we couldn't even appreciate when we were kids, because what did we know? But which today, you can look all around the world and recognize what a big deal it is. Many of the people we were taught when we were kids in school that many people came over to the United States for religious freedom. And even today, there are people who live in countries where you have to be a certain religion. And if you're not that religion, you can be persecuted or even killed. Okay. Now, separation of church and state within our Constitution works this way. It has a dual function. On one hand, it means that no minister, priest, rabbi, imam, monk, ayatollah, anyone like that, is going to walk into the U.S. Capitol, march down to the front where the senators and Congress people are making laws and say, you have to scrap that law. And they're not going to say, you have to pass this law. You're not going to do that because the separation of church and state protects our government from interference by religious clergy. It also has an equally important function, which is the following. No policeman's going to come in here tonight and tell us to break it up. No policeman's going to come in here. Couldn't do that. No policeman could say, unity? What kind of cockamamie stuff is that? That's not on our official list of Christianity. You guys break it up. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen if it was a synagogue. It wouldn't happen if it was a mosque. It wouldn't happen if it was a young atheist meeting. Because part of the importance of separation of church and state and freedom of religion is not only freedom to believe how you wish to believe or freedom to not believe. Mm-hmm. That's equally important. Remember, our founders were reacting to centuries of persecution, inquisition, all those kinds of things. This was profound, and it still is profound. And the fact that it still is profound is all the more reason for us to understand and recognize and rise to the occasion of being in our time the righteous citizens who are protectors of these principles so that we can bequeath them to our children. Because when the United States actualizes our own principles, this is a light unto the nations. Now, we've never gotten it perfectly. We've never totally embodied and actualized our own principles. Of the men who actually bequeathed those principles to us, 41 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence were themselves slave owners. So we've always been this dichotomy. That's our characterological story. It's in our DNA. That we, on one hand, are based on the most enlightened principles of equality and freedom, but we also at times have been the most violent perpetrators of transgression against them. And the story, our narrative over time, is how generations after generations rise up to right the wrongs. And we did. We answered slavery with abolition. We answered the suppression of women with suffragette movement and two major ways of feminism. We answered institutionalized white supremacy and segregation with the civil rights movement. And even now, the work you've done with racial healing, the next stage of racial healing, and many of the other ways in which our generation is faced with challenges to our values that are just as potent and so significant and just as significant, and which demand of us just as much courage to push back as has been true in any other generation. The separation of church and state then was not meant by our founders to suppress the religious or spiritual conversation. It was meant to protect the religious and spiritual conversation. Now, I understand how important it is that we have a tradition in this country that stems from that, a tradition of keeping our political conversation secular. And I respect that. I'm Jewish myself, so I know what happens when somebody has a conversation going on within the political realm that doesn't include my group. It's dangerous, it's exclusive, it's not okay. So no one is more committed than I am to that. And within my campaign, I'm very careful about that. I don't open up a campaign event with a prayer. I don't close it with a prayer, although even there, we might note they open every session of Congress with a prayer. They open the inauguration of a president with a prayer, but for whatever reason, and you might have seen it recently, if you do it, Cedric, or you do it, Preston, we have great respect. If you do it, we have great respect. If I do it, I'm a wacko nut child New Age. And I hope that you will stand up to that for me. And I take it very seriously, because it has been that mischaracterization and misrepresentation of my work. As citizens of South Carolina, I hope that you will not only not be swayed by that very intentional smear. That narrative is very intentional. It's very intentional. So I must be doing something right that they're coming in. Check, went through that. And they laugh at you, check, went through that. And then they fight you. And then what happens after that?
You're right. You win.
So I have felt, as Reverend Margaret has said, I have felt the call within the political system and to participate, and obviously to participate in a pretty dramatic way, and that I am running for the Democratic nomination for the presidency. That just, you know, every cell in the body is assigned, and each and every one of us are assigned. And one of the things it says in the Course in Miracles is sometimes what the Holy Spirit says to you will sound startling at the time. But I think that we're living in a time, both in terms of our own personal paths and also in the life of this country. I've never known my fellow citizens to be so alert to danger, not in my lifetime. I know my parents' generation was, Pearl Harbor and so forth. I've never known my generation to be so alert to danger, and I've never known my generation to be so available to the solution. When Reverend Margaret was talking about that which is the enthusiasm for possibility, we have someone in our country, in the highest office of the land, who has harnessed some of the worst aspects of the human character for political purposes. Yes. It's not like we ever thought that there were no racists in America. It's not like we ever thought there were no homophobes in America. We never thought there were no bigots in America. We never thought there were any xenophobes in America or anti-Semites in America. Of course there were. But we thought we had reached a point of consensus. We thought we had reached a point on the left and on the right, among Republicans, among Democrats, that there were lines past which we would not go. That there were levees, and that no one would be giving a serious political megaphone to such voices. We thought we had achieved that. And what has happened, and it happened so quickly that I think it's been shocking for all of us, is those levees have fallen. And part of it was social media, because anybody can have a megaphone. And part of it is that we have someone who, for his own political purposes, was actually willing to harness those things for his own personal use. Now, I read an interview, and in that interview, Jared Kushner said about his father-in-law. I love this one. He said they were at McDonald's at the time, which is just fascinating. And they were at McDonald's, and Jared Kushner said to his father-in-law, there are a lot of very angry people out there, and we could harness that, and we could make you president. And I thought to myself, I see a lot of dignified, decent, really good people out there. We could harness that and change the world. There are a lot more lovers than haters in this country.
Yeah.
A lot more lovers than haters. And a lot more lovers than haters on this planet. I believe that with all my heart.
Yes.
What has happened in our country and elsewhere is that hate has become harnessed for political purposes. Those who hate are strategized. That's what was happening that's what's happening when you're talking about marching the streets of Charlottesville. We've seen it before. We know what collectivized hate can do. That's what the Ku Klux Klan was. That's what Nazis are. Collectivized hate is one of the most dangerous elements in human history.
Yep.
Collectivized hate is a clear and present danger to life on earth. And what has happened on this in our time in ways that none of us thought would be happening is that those who are racist, those who are bigoted, they have been legitimized in some perverse way. They are strategized, and the word from A Course in Miracles that particularly is relevant here is the word conviction. The Course in Miracles says, miracles arise from conviction. Conviction is a force multiplier. Conviction is when you bring it down. It's one thing for a thought to just be hanging out. It's another to bring it down. And today the haters are bringing it down. And so even though there are many more lovers than haters, those who hate with conviction. So if you have a few people who hate with conviction and a lot of people who love without conviction, the haters are going to carry the day in terms of human manifestation. And that is why politics matters. That's all that politics is our collective behavior. That's all it is. It's our collective behavior. And all that a country is a collection of people. So the same psychological and emotional principles that prevail within the journey of one person prevail within the journey of a nation. So we have learned what love can do. That's what Amazing Grace is about. We have learned what love can do. But this is what it means. That person who wrote that song, he had to open his eyes and see what he was doing. He had to be honest before God. He had to recognize, well, that's evil. And that's when his eyes opened, and that's what opened his eyes. And he not only saw what was evil, he atoned for what was evil, and he stopped doing what was evil. And he took another path. That's how our lives change. We have to take a deep and honest look at ourselves. Have any of us transformed in our lives without taking what in AA is called that serious, fearless moral inventory? You have to look at yourself. Where are you and where are you not who you say you are? Where have you been and where have you not been the person standing on the values that you purport to believe in? And that doesn't mean you're a bad person if you see that you have character defects. We all have character defects. It doesn't make us a bad country. It makes us a good country. It doesn't make us a weak country. It makes us a strong country. For this country to admit our character defects. And for this country to admit some of the psychic and behavioral and economic and social underbellies of our history, whether it has to do with black people or Native Americans, whether it has to do with our foreign policy, whether it has to do with this corporate imperialism of the last few decades, whereby our country and our government in both domestic and international policy has placed short-term profits for huge multinational corporate entities, whether they were fossil fuel companies or gun manufacturers or health insurance companies or big pharmaceutical companies or defense contractors, before the health and well-being of people in our country and elsewhere, before the health and well-being of the planet. Love does not say, oh, okay. Love says, no way, stop right there. Martin Luther King said, power without love is reckless and abusive, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. We need to love with conviction today, and that means we can't just love our own children. We have to love children on the other side of town. We have to love children on the other side of the world. When I went to the Homestead Detention Center in Florida the day after the DNC debate, kidnapping is a crime. And if your country does it, if your government does it, that doesn't make it less of a crime. That's called state-sponsored crime. And in purposeful, intentional infliction of trauma on a child, that's called child abuse. That's a crime. And if your government does it, that doesn't make it less of a crime. That makes it state-sponsored crime. You know, I'm Jewish, and every Jew grows up with a lot of knowledge about the Holocaust. And the big thing about the Holocaust, many of you I'm sure have been to Holocaust museums. But the Holocaust Museum of all Holocaust museums is called Yad Vashem. It's in Jerusalem. And it's amazing, the pictures and the videos. And one of the things that you see there are all these videos of Hitler talking years before he came to power. And he said what he thought. He said what he would do. And everybody went, crazy guy. Crazy man. We don't have to worry about that. Our democratic institutions will hold. That's why the big question later was, why didn't you leave in time? That's what they said to so many people in Italy. That's why they said to so many people in Germany, why didn't you leave? And everybody kept saying, well, we just didn't think it could happen here. And so we must be very sophisticated here. Love does not look away. Love helps the sufferer. And those of us who are metaphysicians know that you don't wait till the effect appears if you see it on the level of cause. I wrote a book called Healing the Soul of America that came out in the late 90s. And everybody in that book was talking about wealth inequality and mass incarceration and racial disparity and criminal sentencing and all that stuff in the late 90s. And later people said to me, how did you know? I said, it was there. Now it's a stage 4 cancer, but it was already a stage 1 cancer.
That's right.
And I'm trained as a metaphysician. So I don't just look on the surface. I look at what's going on underneath the surface. When people would say in the late 90s, oh, everything's so good, I would say, well, doesn't that depend on what neighborhood you're in? Doesn't that depend on what part of the world you're in? Because I see some places where it's not so good. And I know how inertia operates. It's going to continue this way. It's no different than addiction. Addiction is a progressive illness. And the way we have, over the last 40 years, been bamboozled by an economic theory that just make it about the short-term profits for these huge corporations, and it's really good, and then all that money will trickle down and it will help people, and that will be good, and it will lift all boats, even though after 40 years, I think it's good to say the jury's in after 40 years. It didn't lift all boats. It left millions of people without a life vest. It left 1% of Americans owning more wealth than the bottom 90%. It has left millions of people with chronic economic anxiety. It has left millions of people so emotionally and psychologically debilitated because it's so hard just to make it in this country, in the richest country in the world. Does love ignore that? And does love ignore that just because we were the lucky ones? No. Righteous commerce means nobody wants to make money if it's at the expense of other people's ability to do so.
That's right.
Does love look away from the fact that millions of American children go to school every single day in schools where there aren't even the school supplies with which to teach a child to read? We have millions of American children who go to school every day and ask their elementary school teacher if they have any food for them. We have millions of American children in the richest country in the world who go to school hungry. And yes, they're in South Carolina. We have millions of American children who live in situations that are so intensely violent that psychologists tell us they have a form of PTSD that is no less severe than the PTSD of a returning veteran from Iraq or Afghanistan. Now, let's be really clear here. The political establishment has normalized the despair of these children. If they are the invisible ones, they're just called at-risk youth, and we leave it at that. Because they're not old enough to vote, so they're not a constituency, they're not old enough to work, so they have no financial leverage. Maybe government is going to ignore them. Those of us who are spiritual seekers must not. The religious and the spiritual foundations which have stood up and interrupted patterns of lovelessness. The U.S. government didn't stand up and say, oh, let us end slavery. That's not what happened. The abolitionist movement came from the early evangelicals. It came from the early Quakers. It came from the people rising up, and the people stepped in. Same with women's suffrage. The U.S. government didn't say, oh, let us give women the right to vote. That's not what happened. The women's suffrage movement emerged. The people stepped in. And civil rights, right here, ladies and gentlemen, the government didn't wake up and say, oh, let us end segregation. It was Dr. Martin Luther King. It was the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. It was the civil rights movement rose up. The people stepped in. And I'm saying to you, what is happening in our country today? And this did not begin with Donald Trump. I'm not prosecuting a case against Donald Trump. I'm prosecuting a case against the system that we're used to.
Yes.
He did not create this. He was created by this. And this is something that has been going on for 40 years, and we have in too many ways allowed it. He is an opportunistic infection. It couldn't have happened if we had not had a societally compromised immune system. That was then, this is now. Each and every one of us must be the cells in this immune system. This country is worth saving. This country matters. Have we made some big mistakes? Oh, yeah. And do we continue to make some mistakes? Oh, yeah. But other generations before us have risen up to self-correct when it needed to be corrected. This country had slavery, and the abolitionists rose up. This country had a suppression of women, and the women suffragettes rose up. This country had institutionalized white supremacy and segregation, and this country rose up, a generation rose up, in the face of a sociopathic economic system. And you know what's interesting about sociopaths? Because this is a community, we all read Sociopath Next Door. We all know that there are people who have no conscience. We know that there are people who have no remorse. We know there are people who have no love. And you must have boundaries with them. And we know how dangerous and destructive it is if you allow them to dominate your life. We have fallen under the spell of what is essentially a sociopathic economic system that has corrupted our government with huge, huge amounts of money. It has hijacked America's moral value system to the point where children suffer, old people suffer, the earth suffers, too many people suffer both in this country and in this world. And if our lives mean anything, as Martin Luther King said, your life begins to end on the day you stop talking about things that matter. Your life matters, my life matters, and our life matters. We are citizens of the most powerful country in the world, and we have a deep moral responsibility to put this thing right where it has swerved and gone wrong. Other generations have done it before us, and it is our turn to do it now. But if we're going to just look at the political system and think it's going to right itself, that's the silliest thing. Are we that naive? Are we that naive? I don't think we're that naive. So I challenge the idea that only people whose careers have been entrenched for decades in the system that drove us into this ditch are qualified to leave us out of this ditch. The founders knew what they were doing. They put the power in our hands. And I say to you, as a fellow American, and with this group I can say it, as a woman of God, let us rise up. Let us be the light that casts out darkness. Let us be the love that casts out fear. We will be more peaceful, and we will die happy knowing we showed up.
Bring us another song, and then we're going to do a Q&A. Oh, Cedric's going to do it, okay. And then we're going to do a Q&A, so think of your question.
My
It's hard to imagine, but several weeks ago, 2 people in my congregation told me that I was getting too political. And so the actual statement was, why are you talking about all these things? And my question is, why are we not talking more about it? The rest of the sentence is, why are churches not talking more about what's happening? So we're going to have a quick Q&A, and I'm going to be Monty Hall and bring the microphone and Q&A for Marianne.
Thank you for being here. I'm Cassandra Butler. So, even though the people in this room and other New Thought communities are ready for you to be president,
She just got to be closer to her mouth.
so even though New Thought communities and the people in this room are ready for you to be president, most of the country probably is not. So I'm going to assume that the next Democratic nominee, once they're elected, are going to ask you to be a part of the administration.
Yes.
So if you had a choice, would you like to be ambassador to the UN? That way you're in the same room with the cabinet members and can influence them that way. Or maybe Secretary of Education, where you can teach tolerance or human values, make it mandatory in the schools. Do that, mandate that? Or what would you like to do?
I'm an American woman, and I'm not going to involve myself in any idea that by definition I can't have it all. I'm not even involved in your supposition, ma'am. Absolutely. If you put all the people in this country who are either religious, into health and wellness, spirituality, yoga, AA, or meditation, they'll vote for me, I win. Well, maybe you can talk to the powerful ones. No, that stuff stops with our generation. And also, and it's very insidious. It is very insidious. And also, I think it's the opposite of that. It's whether all those people who do agree with me are ready to send $1. That's really what it's about. That's really what it's about, because a lot of people in the spiritual communities are not in the habit of giving to political campaigns. That's really what it's about. It's just a lot. It's not a cultural habit, right? And all we're talking about, I mean, the campaigns run on small donations, $5, $10. I mean, it doesn't take a lot. It's just a habit of giving. A lot of people who are new to political campaigns don't realize that sometimes it is just that $5, $10, $5 a month or whatever that does fuel campaigns. So if first of all I know is that my heart said to do this, and I'm here. But I'm not here to waste anybody's time. I'm not here to waste my time. This is too hard. Now, I'm not doing this to be symbolic or to get my voice out there. My voice is out there. So I'm not saying that I have to win or anything like that, but I am saying nobody knows who's going to win. And also, remember on earth, Donald Trump is president. What are we talking about here? And there's something really radical about democracy. It's for the people to decide. It's for the people to decide. It's not for a party to decide. It's not for the gatekeepers. I call it the political media industrial complex. And they put that thought in your mind. Don't kid yourself, man. You know, they call you a long shot in order to make sure that people think of you as a long shot, therefore see no point voting for you, even though I would want you, but the rest of the country isn't ready. If I had the vote of everybody who says, I would want you, but the rest of the country isn't ready, I would win. You know, whether or not I should be president should come from your heart and your wisdom. But it should not be based on what you think other people are thinking. Amen. And it should not be based on anything anybody's saying to you other than that. And I will say this. There are really good people running. And we're in South Carolina. So it's your civic responsibility to hear all of us. You know, to hear everyone that you feel moved by. And there's some really good people running. I think it's healthy for our democracy that so many people are running. And that is what you should do. And then on that day, when you vote next February, it is your civic responsibility to vote, and I think you will vote your heart. Now, if you do not believe that my views and my consciousness, in your mind, according to your wisdom, should be sitting behind a desk in the Oval Office, then you shouldn't vote for me. But if you do, then I hope that it would be that wisdom within yourself or that feeling within yourself that would guide your vote. That's all I'm saying. So, let this, I believe in democracy. It's this radical idea. Does that make sense? Yeah, it makes sense. And if, first of all, I want to say this. If somebody else what you just said, it might not be you, blah, 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 which of course nobody knows who it's going to be. Would you serve in their whatever? I will do whatever, as I'm sure we all will, whatever we feel in our hearts we can do to show up for life. But I will tell you this, it is my belief, an insider political game will not defeat him.
A what?
An insider political game will not defeat him. He is not just a politician, ladies and gentlemen, he's a phenomenon.
Yeah.
And an insider political game will not defeat him. The only way to defeat a phenomenon is with another phenomenon. I'm the one who's had a 35-year career in harnessing the love inside people for massive cultural change. Might want to think about that. Somebody, I hear reporters saying to me, they say you're the anti-Trump, you're the mirror image of Trump. Now, on one hand, I think that's ridiculous and superficial and silly. And on the other hand, I think there's something about homeopathy there. So I say this with a very serious, and I mean this in very serious terms. So this idea of the effort to marginalize and minimize me, why exactly? Why exactly? Because I haven't had a career doing what they do? We should revisit the Constitution a little bit. The Constitution says that in order to be president, you have to have been born here, lived here for 14 years, and be 35 years or older. That's all it says, which I find fascinating. Because if the founders had wanted to say, had you been a governor, had you been a senator, had you been a congressman, had you been a mayor, they would have. And they didn't. Because they were leaving it to every generation to determine for itself the skill set that that generation feels is most necessary to navigate the times in which it lives. This whole idea of a political class, it's very Wizard of Oz. Like there's something going on behind the curtain. And enough of us have been around that what's going on behind the curtain is people are sitting around talking, making decisions. And too many of those people have had campaign donations, including, I'm sorry, do some research, look it up, tens of thousands and hundreds of thousands of dollars from those same corporate entities who are influencing our politics too much. The fact that I'm not of that system is part of why I'm the person who's good for this.
Yes.
Right? So the issue here is, as Franklin Roosevelt said, the primary job of the presidency is not its administrative aspect. He said the administrative aspect is secondary. Its primary role, he said, is moral leadership. FDR said that. And so I believe, and it's not like I don't have respect for traditional political qualifications. Of course they're important. But there are other qualifications that are equally important right now. And I don't have some of those. They don't have mine. We need political vision now, more than we need political, technical expertise. Some very experienced politicians took us into Iraq. It wasn't political qualifications that were missing. Moral vision and wisdom was missing. And deep compassion for human beings was missing. So, this is all just how we're bamboozled, right? Now, once again, if you don't think, if your views do not align with mine, I respect that. But this idea that, somebody has to have this or has to have that, I believe we need a political visionary right now. We need someone with moral certitude. And let me tell you something. We need somebody who has a skill set, the skill at harnessing large groups of people in the interests of love and divine right action. Because I'll tell you something, ladies and gentlemen, if all we do is somehow, with enough, traditional political skill, defeat him, which I believe in my heart, no matter how we must defeat him, I believe, for the sake of our country. But if that's all we do, those same forces will be back in 22. They'll be back in 24. We need to do more than not go over the cliff. We need to get out of the vicinity of the cliff entirely.
Yes.
What I'm bringing here is a deeper conversation. And I have great respect for many of the people who are running, great respect for many of them who are running, but it's an old 20th century model of politics. It's only dealing with the effect. It's not dealing with the cause. It's a political filter that it's 20th century thinking. It's like allopathic medicine. They're like allopathic doctors. And it's time for an integrative politics where we understand how people feel matters. To me, the economics of the 21st century should rest on two basic principles. Number one, educate your children. Number two, unleash the spirit of your people. You'll have so much prosperity, you won't even know what to do. Public policy should help people thrive. That's what public policy should do. And that's why I want a massive realignment of investment in the direction of children. It's why I want a Department of Children and Youth. It's why I want a Department of Peace, because I don't want to give just $750 billion to the Defense Department, but only less than $1 billion to the peace builders, with peace-building agencies that actually expand economic opportunities for women, expand educational opportunities for children, reduce violence against women, and ameliorate unnecessary human suffering are the statistical factors that increase peace and decrease violence. That's not less sophisticated, that's more sophisticated. Political sophistication. Have you not noticed that Tulsi Gabbard and I are the only people who even talk about foreign affairs? Notice that? Notice how they tell you what the issues are, rather than a space being that we tell them what we think the issues should be. We've just allowed it. We have conspired in our own disempowerment. We're just playing spectators. Because we're not talking about the things that would be inconvenient for them to talk about, because it would actually challenge the fact that they get so much money. All of them, ladies and gentlemen, all of them from the forces that keep the system exactly as it is. I'm sorry to be the bearer of bad news, but it's like an intervention. It is like an intervention, and that is why the skill I bring to this after 25 years, 35 years. I mean, that's what we do in the New Thought community. We know, I feel about the whole country. Like when you know a woman and her husband's cheating on you and you talk to your friend, should we tell her? I feel like saying that to every American baby, they're cheating on you. And in terms of the way the system operates, it's not about bad people. It's about good people, a lot of really good people. But the system itself is corrupted to the core.
We agree with that.
I want to thank you so much for all you've done and what you stand for. And I'm a major manifester, and I have bought your hat.
Thank
And I want everybody else to.
It's not all the time to say that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
I first met Marianne in Colorado, the Columbine shootings. I was a part of the board, and you came, and I think I see now so much more clearly the healing that you did for our community. This is 1999, folks. This woman knew then about healing. She was there. We had called her, and I remember you speaking. She's phenomenal in so many ways. I've been following you for so many years. But her father was the most amazing, iconic immigration lawyer, a fighter. Her brother is this amazing immigration lawyer who led our organization nationally. So what I have today is a fire in my heart. I have love in my heart. I have $1 in my pocket. And what I would like to know is, there are so many people that ask me, for example, what can we do about the children at the border? What can we do? There are so many people in this wonderful community that want to do something. So, and you have vision, and you have vision and intuition, you've got all of that. What in your vision would be the best way that we as a community could spread the message of love and the empowerment and all of the incredible stuff that you just shared with us today?
Martin Luther King had an expression, coalition of conscience. A coalition of conscience. When I went to the Homestead Detainment Center, and they don't let you in, but you get up on a ladder and you can see over the fence. And what was so impressive to me, what impacted me, was not only hearing what is happening inside the detainment center, but what impressed me so was seeing all the people who show up there day in and day out in that Florida heat just to bear witness to the agony inside. And that is what Mahatma Gandhi called soul force. Do not look away. Do not look away. According to the Gospel of Thomas, the night before the crucifixion, when the disciples wanted to fall asleep, if you only hear that story from your outer eye, they wanted to go to sleep because it was so late at night. With your inner eye, you realize they wanted to go to sleep because they knew how painful it was. They wanted to go to sleep because they knew what was going to happen the next day. And according to the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus said to them, "Can you not remain awake with me 1 hour in the hour of my agony?" So that's where it begins. Don't go to sleep. That's where it begins. Stay awake. If there is not one issue that you can't just Google and find out ways that you can help. Now, obviously, you know about that. I think the ACLU is a very good source of work on this particular issue. One of the things I didn't understand was with all this talk about impeaching the president, and I'm not weighing in on that one way or the other because I have conflict about it in my own heart. I see both sides of that question, but I will tell you this. If anybody was going to be bringing impeachment proceedings for high crimes and misdemeanors, I think obstruction of justice is the least of it. How about kidnapping? How about child abuse? If that's not, if you make me president, whoever is behind, whoever was the architect, whoever it was in the administration or even up to the president himself, who came up with this idea and perpetrated this idea of kidnapping as state-sponsored policy, and the infliction of this kind of trauma as state-sponsored policy. You make me president, that person or those people will be held accountable to the full extent of the law.
So, Marianne,
Oh, to help me in the campaign, let me tell you what it is. In order for me to make it in the third debate, I need 42,000 more unique donations, which means if you have not given at all, even $1. And beyond that, the money, ladies and gentlemen, is so obscene, but it's true. So this is the way it works in politics. I have 2 really great people on the team here in South Carolina. The issue is that other candidates have 20 and 25 people. So it's not mysterious. It's how big an infrastructure. I think of my campaign like a bonsai tree. It has what every other campaign has, right? But it can't go past a certain limit. So that's the issue. Once again, it's about manifestation. And that's another thing about the New Thought community that I do find odd. The New Thought community does spend money. The New Thought community, I remember I was having a fundraiser in LA. And somebody said, and the woman who was having the fundraiser at her house, I noticed that she made, it was something like $15 or something. I said, well, are you sure it should be such a low cost? And she said, well, you know, it's a bunch of yogis. And then a bunch of yogis who don't walk into a yoga class without wearing a $250 This is a community that does spend money, but when it comes to we play poor all the time. It's so selective. So, like I said, this community, when it comes to politics, simply does not have a habit of giving to political campaigns. If I could, if it was legal, I would say, not that much that it would be illegal. It would be confusing. It would not be good for the campaign for me to say, okay, we'll do a Course in Miracles weekend, okay? Then you mix it up. I would do that if I could, but that would be confusing. You see what I'm saying? So when you ask that really is about money. It's about getting on Instagram. It's about tagging me on Twitter. It's about tagging me on Facebook. When you see somebody on Twitter say I'm a nutcase, getting on and saying, actually, I don't believe she's a nutcase, weighing in, speaking up on my behalf, that's really, this is where it is. Making a little, if you feel, on your video, make your own video, on your Instagram page, tag mine. It's about creating buzz. It's just about creating buzz. Because I will need those 42,000 more to stay in for the debate, the third debate. I will need the 2% in 4 polls, and you're South Carolinians, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, you have the power. People in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and now California, you have the power. Rachel Maddow does not have the power you have. MSNBC does not have the power you have. CNN does not have the power you have. You have the power. And that's why I'm in this. Because I don't care what they say about me. I mean, I do on a human level. It's painful sometimes. But I also see some other stuff. There was one New York Times article that said, her performance was weird, but weirdly compelling.
I love being simply compelling.
So my point is that I understand that there are two political universes. There's the dog and pony show. What's going on TV? The polls, the money, all that. And then there's this. And you know what? This is where the power is. I'm aware of that. And being here with you tonight, this is exhilarating. This is meaningful. I'm really grateful, and I feel very privileged.
So, Marianne, I want to bring up something. That was Danusha Lipinski. Danusha, would you stand up just a minute, honey? Danusha is also an immigration attorney. And she is a part of a group that meets here once a month at this church called Humane Immigration Solutions. If you want to be a part of that group and get involved in what we're doing, speak with Danusha or our board president, Bob Shipman. Bob, stand and let them speak with Bob Shipman. If you want to get involved with that. And then we have another question back here.
And let me ask you a question. Did I answer your question? Did I answer your question?
Yeah. Especially at the end.
I saw a woman up here holding up a sign, and last Monday night, before the Course in Miracles meeting in Charlotte, I went to the corner of where Whole Foods is in Charlotte, pretty busy corner, and I stood out there by myself and held up a sign, and people were tooting, people were giving me the thumbs up, people were and look what happened in Puerto Rico. I think we all need to get but it was actually a whole lot of fun.
That is really true about Puerto Rico.
What did you do with your mic?
She gave it away.
I don't know what happened.
You gave it to her.
Let me say one more thing, Marianne. Let me say one more thing.
I just want to say one thing. I mean, they lie, you know? They turn against us.
Who is they? Well, this is what I think, ladies and gentlemen. There are many wonderful people in politics, and there are many wonderful people in media, too. It's systems that have become corrupted.
Yep.
Let's not make it personal. Let's not personally demonize. It can't be on a personal level.
Amen.
And I certainly encountered some journalists who are, do not have journalistic ethics as I would define them, but I've seen others who are pleasantly surprised if you give an intelligent answer and will give you the space. So I think we need to practice. Remember, nonviolence has to begin with us.
Yes.
And it's what Reverend Margaret said. We have to dwell in enthusiasm for possibility. Where there is love, miracles occur naturally. So where someone has harnessed fear for political purposes, we're harnessing love for political purposes, and that has to mean love even for those with whom we disagree. Yes.
Marianne, thank you for who you are and all you do. I am a semi-retired unity minister. This is my home church. I love volunteering here. And on Sunday mornings, I facilitate a small group discussion. And one of the things I believe in heartily is metaphysics. So when watching the news at home or any of those channels, one of the things that I have great conflict with is the metaphysics of energy, vibration. When the news comes on and my wife says, "Oh, that," and then something nasty comes in, I keep going, see the Christ in him, see the Christ in him, because somewhere in that little boy, there's a flicker of good in there. And then I try to convince myself. And it's really hard sometimes.
You know, we talk about metaphysical language, and when the Course in Miracles talks about resurrection and crucifixion, resurrection is the state of vibrational uplift when love is present, and crucifixion is the invalidation of love that fear brings forth. Okay? This is what the Course says. Look at the crucifixion, but do not dwell on it. So if you don't look at all, like I said earlier, you're not in transcendence, you're in denial. But you don't have to watch the whole hour.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So you need to look at it enough to know what's going on. You got to know what's going on. But it is true, if you become focused on it too much, then it expands. And you can feel it within yourself, which it is. You can feel it.
I have really enjoyed you. I haven't really voted in quite a while because of all of that. And I hold space for love and peace, and I did not want to bring my energy into something that, a lower energy into that. I prefer to just hold the space for love and let it transcend out. And if you separate the behavior from the person, okay, realize it's a behavior, but see the person as a child of God like we all are. That's how you separate, and that's how you can really bring the love out without putting personality into it. But one of the main things I wanted to say was, for the people, by the people, of the people, that's how we change it, just like you said. Every generation. Exactly, we have to vote. And I am going to be voting for you this year. I haven't voted for years. There you go.
I hope you remember, as South Carolinians, you have power. I mean, these four states have power. And I believe we need to see our citizenship as a dimension of a well-lived life.
Marianne, I hate to be the bearer of sad news, but you are going to Beaufort tonight, to Jack Bomar's church. And we need to have you over here signing some books before you go. So we need to start wrapping it up.
Okay, how about one sentence and I'll answer in one sentence? Okay, one sentence.
How are you at herding cats? The Democratic Party wants to represent all of this diversity.
I think it's beautiful that democracy is diverse. I think it's messy. Democracy is messy. That's a good thing. Freedom doesn't mean we don't have to agree with each other. This is election season. We're listening to everybody. We're duking it out. This is a beautiful thing. We are only a minority of the world where we can do what we're doing. In fact, we don't have to agree. We're going to have a year. I think this is a good thing. It's a beautiful thing. That's my answer.
Just real quick, I'm going to be a resident of Florida very soon. How would I find out where I could volunteer for you?
Thank you. Please go to my website, marianne2020.com, and there's a place where it says to volunteer, and visualize that I'm the nominee, so I have a Florida campaign. People in other states can still get money and create buzz.
We would keep you here all night.
We would.
Let me know that you're...
She just wants to go home.
Okay, so we're going to take Celestial's question, and then we're going to have a book signing over here and a little meet and greet, and then y'all need to scoot her over to Beaufort, right? Okay.
What about donations tonight?
Oh, thank you for asking. So if you want to donate to Marianne's campaign, see this woman in purple with her headdress on. And if you, because we're speaking of donations, we have 2 offering plates set out because many of you have been asking where do we donate for this evening to Unity Myrtle Beach. So there's one back there and there's one up here. Your donations are very appreciated for the work we do here. So Celestial has a question. Then we're going to do a book signing.
No, because we did it, but you have the donation envelope to whatever.
Trey, did you want to say anything?
You want me to say something?
No, we've covered all
Okay,
that.
that's fine.
But you have the donation envelope.
They're downstairs. All of the donation envelopes are downstairs on the stage on Tuesday at the debate, but now we're working on getting her on the stage in September. We know that you want to see her. We all want to see her. So please make a donation. We need 43,000 individual donations. So whether you donate $1, $100, or $1,000, it makes a difference. So please, see the ladies downstairs, make a donation, get a button, a t-shirt, a hat. How do we make the checkout? We make the checkout to Marianne 2020. It might be good to pass it around.
We'll do that.
We'll bring the envelope
And-
up here. Yeah. Let me
Let's
get
let
that.
this young woman ask her question.
Yeah, we'll bring the envelope up here.
Broad brushstrokes. I am a little bit unclear when you say universal health care because I kind of feel like, do you mean a public option? Do you mean like Medicare for all? Do you have a specific?
That's the question that is really the big issue right now. When you look at something like Senator Bernie Sanders' plan, it's to go immediately into Medicare for all. Nobody can have private insurance. It's just an immediate transfer into that. If you look at someone like Congresswoman Jayapal's plan, it is to have at least a 2-year transitional period. This is a really tough question. I understand those people who say we need to go immediately into Medicare for all, immediately, no public option period. I have concern about that. I have concern about it because I feel, you know, it's like I said the other night, if any of you saw me on Stephen Colbert, I want to be an agent of change. I don't want to be an agent of chaos. And there's a lot I want to do as president. I want a Department of Childhood and Youth. I want reparations for slavery. I want a Department of Peace. There's a lot I want to do. You're talking about so many trillions immediately. So on that. So I'm in conversation. My very progressive friends are like, no, Marianne, it has to be immediate. What are you talking about? What has happened to you? You're going over to the dark side. It's got to be that competitive all right away. No, there can't be a public option. And other people say, you know, I hear very smart people. So I would say on that one, I'm in process on that. That we need Medicare for all, absolutely. But even Congresswoman Jayapal's plan has that 2-year transitional period. You know, we have to be very, we want to navigate fundamental change. And you don't navigate fundamental change just by blowing everything up. So I have serious questions about that. I'm deep in conversation because I hear very impassioned people talking to me on both sides of this one. And I tend to be with the group on almost everything. Who you can't believe on, not just the total Bernie thing on the, but I believe that what I bring to this is the realization. You know, in the Course in Miracles, when it comes to personal change, there's a principle there. That if you're working with a person on their changing, you have to be very careful. Because if you do too much too fast, it shuts down. People shut down. And I feel that that's true socially as well. That it'll lock the brakes. That's my concern. So that's why I might not be giving you the answer that you want on that. But that's where I'm coming from. The idea that I have concern about going to, you know, there are many things that factor in there. If people want, you know, I think you get my point.